welcome to the Rehumanization Station. I'm your collaborator, Christopher Jones, aka Dr. X. This podcast is an extension to my Flippin' and Vibin' brand, where vibers seek to transform narratives in society, education, sport, today art, and a variety of other sectors, right? And today is our collaborative practice series where we have a curious viber named Devine with us today. Devine, how are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you.
Thank you for being here today. It's been a long time coming, I guess you could say. Even though this is our brand is still fresh. This station is fresh, but we have it's exciting talk today because Devine, Southgate Smith's approach to art making is medium, non-specific, and collaborative. This is reflected through a transdisciplinary practice that comprises photographic collage, sculpture, moving image, text, poetry, and 3D animation. Central to this approach is a meticulous focus on selecting, ordering, and assembling archival material. Southgate Smith invites us to consider archives as temporal instruments essential to envisioning a future deeply connected to the past. The work evokes an Afro-diasporic counter-memory, blending personal, literary, folkloric, and historical narratives to create layered, speculative spaces that map histories beyond prescribed context. Cool. We ready today. Today's going to be a good episode. But so, got a chance to get a bit of your bio, right? So now we're going to get to the first part of the show, which is the vibing questions.
Yeah.
So this is the part of the show where we just vibe and allow our listeners to, I guess, get an idea of your story, your background, and, your personal interests.
Yeah.
All right. So, and if people are watching on video, excuse me, I sometimes have to get up because the light's it's an automatic light. But other than that, we're good to go. All right. So just to start, why don't you just tell us about yourself? What's your story? Tell us a bit about your birthplace, your family, friends, etc.
I'm Devine, and my name is pronounced as Devine as opposed to Divine because I was born in Togo, West Africa, which is a French-speaking country. So my colonial tongue, I guess, is French. I moved to the UK when I was younger, around like the age of 10 or 11, and I've been here ever since, apart from living in other countries for a little while, but most of my time is spent in the UK. I moved, my aunt adopted me, so I moved to this country with my sister, and
there's light.
That's me, I guess.
And sister, older, younger sister?
Younger sister.
Okay, it was ironic because you said your sister went to Durham University, right?
Yeah.
That's where I went. What did your sister study?
She studied Chinese history and Mandarin.
Mandarin, okay, cool. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And so what do you like to do as far as like just as hobbies outside of your work?
Outside of my work, it's such a strange question because I guess for me my work is also my hobby. It's like something that I'm passionate about. But what I do, I guess, is like hang around with my friends who are musicians. Like that's my other love. So I play the guitar. I really love.
How long have you been playing the guitar for?
I would say I've been playing the guitar for like 6 years. 6 years.
Okay.
I'm like self-taught, but I love like Afro blues and things like that. So I'd like to like it's what I aspire to like do, I guess, like to create compositions. Yeah, I love making compositions.
Okay, and as far as I guess you said about where you went to school, where you're from, what I would say, what's making you stay here in this area?
In this area, in terms of in London.
Yes, in London. Yes.
In London, what's making me stay here? Well, so the thing is, so I studied fine art at Central St. Martin's, and in 2017 I decided to leave London because it's a very difficult place for artists to sort of like, if you want to do art full time, it's a very difficult landscape um, um, to exist as a young artist. So I moved to Portugal, and then through that process, it was, I guess, the best thing that I ever decided to do, because life was cheaper. I was able to have a studio there with a couple of other artists that I collaborate with, and then I came back to London because I applied to the Royal Academy of Arts, which is a very, I guess, prestigious institution. And you, like, when I got in, I was like, well, I mean, this place pays you to be there. Not many institutions do that. Every student has a bursary. And so I thought, free education, free studio in the heart of London, I'll come back. And so since being there, like that was like 3 years ago, no, a year and a half ago, I
Talk a little bit
sorry.
towards the mic. That's good. Yeah, that's better. Right there. Go ahead. Keep going.
Since being there, I've essentially, like, this artist that I met after I graduated, they told me don't leave, because I was thinking of going back to Paris or Portugal, and they're like, no, don't leave, we need this sort of art in this space. And it's an artist that I've deeply respect. I love their work. They actually teach at Oxford, Ruskin, the master's program there. Harold Offe, I love Harold's work, and they were like, no, you need to stay. And so I was like, okay, fine, I'll stay for the I've been here for 2 years since graduating, so I'm here. That's why I'm here, I guess, to see what this artistic landscape has to offer, and whether my practice can exist in a space such as London.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we've talked about this, right, with each other. So if people need to know, our story is interesting because Deveen's flatmate was on Airbnb, and my partner Kati and I were visiting Shoreditch or whatever, and we booked the Airbnb, and then we ended up like vibing, talking to each other, and we ended up getting to know each other. We became friends, right?
Yeah.
And this is why we're here today. This is like a last minute thing, so. I appreciate you being here for that. And we talked a lot about the stuff that you do, some of the stuff that I do, and how it correlates a bit when it comes to, I guess, being black in certain spaces, right? So within that, how did you navigate those spaces, and how is how's black representation within those spaces that you're in?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it was quite. Let's say the Royal Academy is an institution that has been going for, I guess, 250 years. So when I started in 2019, that was the celebration that was happening. They had big banners everywhere in Bond Street, New Bond Street, saying 250 years celebration, Royal Academy. And I thought, 250? I was like, what are we exactly celebrating here? like it was. I thought it was just really funny that that's when I arrived. It was like that birthday, and so I guess like that really tainted my whole perception of the institution. And so let's say it has a very they only take in 10 to 15 artists a year. Wow. Which means that within that demographic, there aren't many students or artists from underrepresented communities. So what often happens is that we will have 1 or 2 black students, even fewer Asian or Hispanic artists. Okay. And so it becomes, it's very visible, the sort of selection process.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess like already what happens is that you're almost like alone within your interests, or like what sort of like artistic interest that you have. And so I think for me at first I was very lucky that I had two students, one from Nigeria and myself from Togo, that were in those in my class, I guess. But it's something that I found very difficult. Let's say I found it difficult because when it comes to art, there's a lot of space for discussion. I mean, art is a form of communicating. It's a form of ways of translating experiences or histories that at least I hope allows for some sort of dialogue to exist. And so being in a space where you don't have many allies, let's say, you're often confronted when there is space to open and speak, you're often confronted with silence, or with how do you say, confrontation.
And why why do you think that is? Because it's similar to like I'm in sociology, so you would assume that everyone is an ally with each other, right? So why do you feel like there's this barrier, or that people kind of create the sense of isolation or alienation when it's an art, when art is about, you know what I'm saying, what you just said, like, so why do you feel like that is? Or if you can remember.
I think I mean, I guess, like, in hindsight, I was frustrated because I just felt like I was not getting the same educational experience. Instead, I was being asked questions that had to do with, like, my being, and questions that didn't really have anything to do with art, essentially, or even the subject of the work. So I guess at first I was a bit more like, this is not equal, this sort of exchange. But I think eventually what I realized is that I think sometimes is also that people don't have the language to be able to engage within these with specific types of work, or with specific types of people. I think also, like, or access to different types of people. And so I guess they have preconceived ideas of, it's almost like it feels like you have, as a racialized body in that space, you're put into a position where it feels as though there is an agenda, like, rather than you're just creating work or probing and thinking, and something that makes you excited as a practitioner. To others, it feels like, what is your ulterior motive here?
Okay, I got you. And that's, man, because you like I said before, you would think that in your discipline that people would be able to be freely, to be able to express themselves and be accepted for just their different ideas and different ways of knowing things and presenting things, right?
That's the naivety that I had going in there. I was so excited.
Man,
I was like, I cannot wait to speak to these amazing artists and have incredible discussions. And in the end, at least within my experience, it was just met with a lot of silence.
Okay.
Which, for me, it's like, I'm someone who's quite resilient and I'm quite malleable in spaces, so I use that silence as the work.
Okay.
So eventually I just started making work that was text, just text on the wall. Black on black text. You know, and it's like you start playing with those things, you start trying to understand, like, okay, so how do you navigate these silences?
Okay. Now, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. Kudos to being able to, I guess, navigate that space and just be resilient in that space, right? And I don't know, did you mention somebody within those spaces, within the work that you do, who is the most influential person for the work that you do?
Oof. Who is the most influential?
Because we know now that people the barriers are influential in different ways.
Yes, right? Exactly.
But now, who in a more of a way where you admire or appreciate that person for either what they've done for you, collect with you, or just something you just seen. I sometimes I use the word I forgot the word I use, like it's a mentor, but it's like I say like virtual mentor sometimes because I
Yeah.
feel like there's mentors that I've had that I've just viewed on YouTube that I never met in
Exactly.
person, right? So I
Exactly.
mean, just something around those lines. Who's
Mm.
somebody that could be?
Who is somebody that is influential to me in that way? I mean, I have a few,
Okay.
depending on yeah, depending. Um, but I think right now, the person who is quite that I'm quite drawn to in terms of like um uh their like is someone that I guess I know within my real life experience, and I'm like finding myself in this like full circle with at the moment. And it would be my art teacher that I met when I was like 13 years old. This person um th- um understood, I guess, that there was something within me that like wanted to express something, whether they knew what it was or not. They allowed me to understand that art was something that is possible. Um, and like I'm finding myself like working with them right now, and I'm like almost like doing this introspection, you know, like thinking of yourself as a child who's just like curious and running around trying to understand the world through everything, through music, through art, through literature. um and this person, I felt like, really channeled me and allowed me to kind of explore um something that within my family dynamic I was not allowed to. Like
Okay.
me doing art was something I yeah, it was not something that I was allowed to do, so I was doing it secretly.
And how? But how are you doing it secretly? You said
So in the sense that
don't want to tell
um
yourself if somebody feels. Uh oh. Uh oh.
in the
Right.
sense in the sense that like they would um like I knew that is something that I wanted to do. So my teacher really would let's say tell white lies to my auntie, that, oh no, she's coming into school to do this, or she's coming into school to do that. And I would go on Saturdays, and I would go in my holidays, I would be in school just making art. And like having someone to like because I come from a household that's like Jehovah's Witness, very religious. And my aunt is a very very amazingly educated woman, but she really believed that specific art forms should not be um, pursued by black
Mhm.
people, and so art is one of those.
Okay. Right.
So and so just to have an older person in my life that really allowed me to to do that thing that I knew that I loved is what allowed me to be able to like be an artist today and
Right.
do art full time.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's good. And it's interesting. I want to hear the word, like you said, the white lies. So it's funny. It's interesting how white lies is the more implicit, acceptable lies.
Yes.
It's white, right?
Yeah,
That's,
exactly.
I always think about
That's
that
so
term,
funny.
right?
I almost catch myself as I was saying that. I was like, oh.
No, I mean that's fine, but it's just interesting how like how certain phrases are like definitely within that framework. Right?
Yes.
Well, thank you for that. So I guess is there any other like is there any other challenging, like what are the most challenging moments do you think
Mm.
that you've had
Mm.
since you've been on your journey as an artist?
Um. Hmm. I think one of the main challenges for me as an artist is to accept my uh, ability to work within different art forms.
Hmm.
I think there is, like, in order for you to be typecasted, I guess, as an artist, there is this uh, perception of I guess it's considered as consistency, in the sense that, okay, I know that this is what you do and this is what you do, in terms of, okay, I'm a painter and therefore I'm a painter. And I think one of the things that I had to accept is that because of my um, background, because of where I come from, because of who I am within the society, some of those ideas just do not fit into the mold of how to survive as a black person within our society. Like, often you find that a lot of black practitioners are interdisciplinary people, or people who work in transdisciplinary ways, in the sense that they're able to use multiple aspects of their ability in order to survive. Multiple aspects of their ability in order to survive.
Okay, gotcha.
And so I think being an artist where you're really being pushed to choose one,
Okay.
and being in a world where like everybody works in many different spaces, many different worlds, I found it very difficult being in like more let's say these sort of like elite institutions that really are dominated by discipline, this idea of like the discipline, what is your discipline? I found that very difficult to be able to say no and assert myself and say like, no, this is who I am and this is how I work. Yeah, I think that's been and it's a constant struggle, because it's also about like, how do I put myself or frame myself within this artistic market.
Okay, I guess. Thank you. So, with that being said, then I guess that's going to get into more of our next set of questions, where we talk more about how you challenge traditional narratives, right? And only thing now is what I say is from your background. Thank you for sharing your background with us. Also, just make sure I know it's difficult, but let's speak in the mic. Your story is amazing. People want to love to hear what you have to say. Just sometimes hard for me too, but this is my first time actually carrying the mic as well. So
yeah, I need to remember to just stay like this.
It's okay. You can move, but yeah, But so yeah, this is a section of the show where we do you need some water or anything, or
I'm good.
You good? The section of the show where we we'll flip the script, right? So I've had a chance to speak with you a lot around different types of work that you do. So we talked about racism within art. We talked about resiliency within art. We talked about Afrofuturism, the transdisciplinary perspective so what we're going to talk about now is let's flip the I would say the monodisciplinary script, right? And sorry, just technical difficulties for the video, but shall we do that? And so to start with that, what would you consider traditional or normative narratives within the work that you do? And we kind of talked about this just
yeah. I guess I kind of touched upon it in relation to like this sort of like disciplinary approach, and like this sort of like that even though we think that artists are like free and can do anything essentially, because it's still tied to institutional frameworks or economic frameworks, that freedom is to a certain extent limited. So I think like I would say that's one of them. This idea of like mastering a craft is something that I think is one of those narratives that I would like as a practitioner would like to dissolve to a certain extent. I think having that curiosity and that freedom to work and play and collaborate with people that you would never think of, researchers, artists, musicians, filmmakers, performance artists, archivists, these are people that I work with, museums, these are people that I work with within my practice, and like I wouldn't do that if I stuck to one discipline. So so I think that's one of the things that I would say. I think the other thing I would like within my own research and concerns within art, one of the things that I'm quite interested in is this idea of innovation and what innovation looks like, and what and and I'm really interested in this idea of Sankofa, which is a Ghanaian symbol.
A
That
Dinkra symbol, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I'm already know where you're going.
Yeah.
Go ahead with it. So the
I'm
audience
really
can know.
interested in that because Sankofa is really this idea that you must look backwards in order to move forward, which completely shifts this idea, this temporal chronology that we have. Obviously, because I'm always dealing with archival material, I'm dealing with chronology, but then there's so many holes within that chronology. There's things that are undocumented, there's things that are unspoken, and the archive cannot capture every aspect of reality, especially of Black experience, because often that archive has been built for a specific narrative. So I'm really, really interested in this idea of that temporal distortion of the Sankofa within my practice, and thinking about innovation in that way, really looking at the past, looking at practices from indigenous communities and folkloric practices as a way to look forward and as a way to reimagine African futures and African innovation. What does that look like?
Wow. So there's a few things I want to unpack. That's amazing. So the first thing you mentioned was about this idea of mastery. It's very interesting you say that, because I have something similar where people would say once you finish your PhD, you're an expert in your topic, and I think like how and then when you're finished, you realize you're not even, that's just one chapter of a long book, a long journey that you have to do, right? And it just feels like I don't, it's hard to consider myself an expert in a field where there's so much knowledge, right? Especially then you brought in the Sankofa, right? So even our brand uses a Dinkra symbol, right? People understand Dinkra symbols come from, say, West Africa, and actually I have a tattoo that was like part of my main contribution. So mine is a Binka B.
Oh wow, yes.
And it's about fair play, justice, and that's pretty much what how I symbolize this brand, right? And it's interesting. So then Sankofa is also another Dinkra symbol, right? Wow. So like, within those two themes, right? That's very important about how we rehumanize, right? And how and it's interesting how, I don't know, how do things connect like that? Because even with artistry, like for me, you know Basquiat.
Yes.
We talked about this I think we talked about this like the first time I met you, but like I never knew who Basquiat was. So people Basquiat was African American.
Yes.
I never learned who he was, but he's one of the greatest artists of all time.
Of all times, yes.
And my partner is from Austria. She's Vienna. They had a gallery, a big gallery. Somebody's making millions, and when they show the video of people like promoting it, everyone was white, by the way, because I don't think he left it to anyone, right? And his art and is really similar to the work that I do, right? About being transformative and flipping the script and challenging like injustice within America, right? And that's wow, that's cool. That's how I feel like I connected with Basquiat. But that's cool. So you said mastery and Sankofa. So learning from the past is very important.
Yes.
And I would say within that, right, we talked about Afrofuturism.
Yeah.
And how does that connect with Afrofuturism? And for context, for people, Afrofuturism, if we want to give it like a specific definition, it's intersectional. It's a way of reimagining the past with the present and making a future on that, right? Something around those lines, right? But it's around African art, Black African art, and how. But the person who made the term was actually a white person named Mark Deary, I think who actually made the term Afrofuturism, which is interesting. But yeah, anyways, okay, that's enough of me. But yeah, just if you want to explain how your work kind of correlates to Afrofuturism, what you're doing in that.
Yeah, I think it's one of those philosophies, I would call it, that I have been like, when people see my work, they constantly reference and they say you should really look into this, and it's something that I'm like finding myself researching at the moment, and like, or at least like dabbling into, because I'm working on something else at the moment. But I think within my practice, because I use computer generated animation, and I'm reimagining and resculpting specific sculptures within archives, creating narratives from objects within the archives. It makes sense that I can consider my work within the framework of Afrofuturism. And for me, I guess what that means is really this idea. I watched this documentary recently by John Okonfra, where they described it as though you have like this. The documentary, by the way, is called The Last Angel of History, and this described it as this idea of like a data thief sort of going through these algorithms, going through this digital plane, and being able to simultaneously have access to information that comes from the past. And they're able to then bring that information back into the present. And as a result, by creating something new, they're able to then project into a future. They're not replicating a past. They're not necessarily they're not replicating the past, but it's the idea of reimagining another reality. And I think Afrofuturism is such an interesting perception, especially when you think about like sci-fi and when you think about sci-fi as like a tool for not necessarily predicting the future, but essentially distorting the reality in which we live at the moment, and reconfiguring the way that we see the world. You can think about it in terms of like a lot of people would say in America they call migrants aliens, right? So in to a certain extent, the experience of being exiled, of being made alien within an environment is a disposition that can make you imagine another reality.
Yes, right.
Because you're confronted with multiple realities, as opposed to, let's say, the person who is within that the person who has access within that world. Because you are exiled from that experience, you already have a different perception. So I think for me, Afrofuturism is really that, like being from a position where you can imagine through seeing from a different vantage point the reality in which you live.
Would you consider it like a sort of like an integrated escapism? I don't know the word, I don't know the term, but it's like you're in it, but you're trying to imagine something that's a bit different, that's outside of it, right? Yeah, but thank you for that. But for the audience, so I just read a book on Afrofuturism. So I need to. I like clarity sometimes. So Afrofuturism is an intersection of imagination, technology, the future, and liberation. So Natasha Womack, she defines it as a way of imagining possible futures through a black cultural lens, right? And it's just Afrofuturism just redefines culture and nations of say blackness and for today and the future. That's pretty much everything you just kind of conceptualized, right? And so, well, thank you for that. That's amazing. And within that, could you, with all the work that you've done and how you're a curious transdisciplinary artist, what was the turning point? What made you think, okay, I want to do this moving forward, and this is something different, challenging. What do you know a particular moment where you wanted to do that, where you felt like that needed to happen?
Yeah, I would say when I so essentially when I was graduating from the Royal Academy, I spent, due to my experience and due to this silence, I spent the time making a publication, a book, because I felt this was my only way to really collage, I guess, that sort of like historical evidencing, and poetry, and poetry as being something that is also an archive, a personal archive. So by making this book, Teeth Kissing, um, Where Elephants Reside, by making this book, I spent 3 years doing that, knowing that you're an artist, you're making a book. Like,
Yeah.
it caused me more stress to
Mm.
explain, but I was like, no, because for me this is art, and I think by really really allowing myself to break down the process of publication, the process of like turning a page and thinking about it, what does it mean to turn the page, the tempo of a book, um the way that words sit on the page, and how that can be accentuated or silenced. So loads of black pages, or
Mhm.
I'm really, that was the moment where I realized, whoa, I never realized that I could work with archive, because it meant that I had to approach a lot of museums. It meant that I had to approach a lot of institutions to have access to some of those images. And when I realized that, oh, actually, well, you can't just make work with archives freely. You need to really go through this like bureaucracy. I realized that, oh, I'm actually quite interested in this process of I'm really interested in like revealing that process.
Okay, and for our audience, so what it would be like a typical day when it comes to like archival work, like kind of if you can briefly explain like what that looks like, where do you go, how do you see certain things?
Yeah, so I mean, so as a result of making that book and approaching a lot of different institutions, I was then asked to do a show with Harold Offe, who essentially saw like they came to my studio, and at the Royal Academy I was supposed to have like an artist crit, and I was a bit late. I was running. I was like, oh, I need to. Something inside me was like, you need to make this meeting. And so I ran and I got there, and they saw the book hadn't been constructed yet, so they see it as like this huge wall. I've like plastered every page onto the wall, and they're like, what is this? I've never seen anything like this before, and they got so excited. And for the first time, I had the most amazing conversation about my work. Imagine being there for 3 years and never having a conversation that like really excites you. So when I did that, then they invited me to have a show with them at the Sainsbury Centre for Visual Arts, and as a result, I was able to show some of my animation in that space with the museal objects. And because I had access to that space, I essentially just spoke with the director, and I said, you have objects in here that I've been literally obsessed with, that I've been designing. Like I would go to museums, look at every angle, take pictures, try to really like understand, read the information that they say. Often the information is not much, so I have to buy books to find more information about those things. And I was like, you have the object right here. Can I have access to this? And the lady said yes. And so since then, my work has been that I'm because now I have access to the Sainsbury Centre as extensive archive. I'm able to then go and visit the works, even works that are not on display. And I go, I'll look at it. I will try to find as much research as I can about the work, find papers on the work or similar works, and often you don't find much information and about like the metaphysics of the work, like why was this made, in what was the reasoning behind it. So then you have to use imagination, you have to piece things together. So what I do is I read a lot of folklore. And so I find books and stories that I'm essentially trying to trace mentions of specific materials, specific practices, specific rituals, specific sculptures, like just by reading these folklores.
Okay, wow. And then to add to that, I mean, I remember like I told the audience how we met. Like we were watching I forgot what we were watching on TV, and like I realized how you work, because you mentioned how. So Davine, like if she's watching something, right, it could be a scene, she could be focused on a vase, like in a room, a vase in the room in the back, and she's like, "That is a peculiar vase right there." We even paused it, right? We paused it. I was like, "Oh wow, okay." But it's cool, like, but it's so like, I don't know, like intricate, detailed about how you do the work that you do, right? And that's amazing. It is amazing though, like, because when you actually do think about it, when you explain it, if people who have open mind and want to understand certain things, different things, is amazing.
Yeah, I think about it as like a way of seeing. Art is really about a way of seeing, and that's a good example. I'm like this. Even when I'm talking to people, I'm like, stop. I'm gonna write down what you just said now because that, and I'll come back to it.
Right.
And I'm really like, I talk about like this idea of like blurring and zooming, like a lot. And I mean, obviously Glissant talks about this, Fred Merton talks about this, and I'm really interested in like the gaze, like that zooming in is really very much about, you're being presented with an image, you're being presented with a perception. How do you look through that? How do you look past that? Like and physically we do that by zooming, by focusing on specific aspects, and then that creates the larger image.
Okay. Wow, that's cool. So what would you consider in your work is I would say activism? And I mean, everything you said is that, right? But if you can like think of something specific that you want to add to what you've said already, anything?
What within my work do I consider as activism? I think for me, I feel like access to information, education is my form of activism for myself. I'm relearning, I'm teaching myself new things that I'm choreographing my own education essentially. Right. So and for me that activism is laying bare that that practice. When I do a show, it's not just that you see the objects, you'll see references to quotations. You'll see like, you can find this object in this museum, in this floor. You can find this book here and here and here. So for me, it's really important for people to have access to their history and be allowed to see things. Like sometimes I'll just put the book in the space with the sculpture. So, if you want us to sit there and read through, then you can, because there's no point in art. There's this like mysticism, there's this idea like, oh, look at this genius, look at this work, look at this thing that is like so far removed from its context. But sometimes we need to put the context there, because that's what allows everyone to have an imagination. You can imagine. If you don't have access to something, you cannot imagine it. You cannot rethink it. You cannot. Yeah. So if you put it there, you never know. Like, someone can just be like, I never thought about this like this, and then they go on their own wild goose chase.
So my knowledge around artistry is limited, but I'm trying to expand it, right? Because like I said, I mentioned Basquiat, how again, like I said, it's that access to education and who's teaching these things and what's in the resource, like what's in the material.
Exactly.
But like I said, I never heard of Basquiat, and but even his artwork is very similar, right?
Yes.
But I was gonna ask, is there a binary, a racial binary when it comes to art? Like, so there's is there like many black artists are perceived a certain way, perceived to do this type of work, or white artists are perceived this type of work, and which work is promoted more mainstream? Yes. Does that make sense? What I'm asking?
Yes. Yeah,
I see this idea around that. Okay.
Yeah, I see this.
Binaries.
I do talk about this with a lot of my artist friends, and like it's you can choose not to see it.
Okay.
You can choose not to see it, but once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And so for me, part of my, I guess, challenge as an artist is that these ways of thinking about the binary within the art world, what kind of art specific artists do, and what kind of works that are promoted as a result. is something that my work really challenges,
Mhm.
because it's like I don't fit into that, and so it's very I could do it, but it's just not my personality. Yeah, I could do it, but I won't enjoy it as much.
You gotta really do what you love, right?
Yeah, I
you
do what I love. So
Right.
so I think, yeah, there is this idea, like in terms of like you can see it as like even conceptual art. It's like I was told in school, you're making white male art.
Really.
Like in art school, my teacher told me this, and I was like, what do you mean? I'm interested in glass. What makes glass inaccessible to black female artists?
So glass was considered white male art.
Essentially, because you have like this pristine surface. You're making a cube, or you're making a spatially designed object. These thoughts are thought within within conceptual art, which is fathered by white male artists. So essentially, he was just saying that this is not the kind of work that you do.
But that is very interesting and very. I'm not surprised. It's disappointing but we actually invented glass. We made glass.
So that's what I'm researching at
That's-
the moment.
Okay. Oh, you are? Okay.
So
Okay.
it's like,
Sankofa. Everyone needs
yeah,
Sankofa.
exactly.
For real.
No, because as like, imagine you're like 19 years old and someone tells you this, because I was so obsessed with glass, and I didn't understand why I was obsessed with it, and I was making sculptures with it, and I love architecture, so I use 3D software, so they were just like, I think he didn't understand how to help me like figure out this thing, and so it stopped me from making sculpture for a long time, because I was like, wait, but this is the material I want to work with.
Mhm.
And now, thank goodness, now I'm doing this research at Norwich University of the Arts, and I'm finally able to spend time researching glass and looking at my relationship with glass, which obviously, like in my country, we wear glass beads on our bodies, and like they have spiritual connotations. They have obviously also monetary connotations. They used to be used as a form of currency in West Africa.
Yes, they did.
So there's like, starting to learn about this, I realized, oh my goodness, it's a practice called jonu, and my family practiced this, and I'm like, of course you had an obsession with glass because you were wearing glass beads all over your body. It's something that was so ingrained within your everyday experience. Like, we wear it because it's a way to measure how you're growing. Like, the mother measures the child, and if you're too skinny, which for me when I was younger, I was very, very I would say anorexic. So it's a way to make sure that the child is growing. Every year you add a bead, or if you need to remove a bead, it means the child is. If you need to remove a bead, it means the child is malnourished. So.
And this was in West Africa.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's like, yeah. And now I'm researching it again, and that's why I'm talking about this idea of innovation. Like, when we think of glass, we think of innovation, we think of the future, we think of like big glass buildings. But in ancient Egypt, they were making glass.
But see, this is where it gets the extra labor always falls back on the people who are alienated the most, right? Because that goes back to what we said about mastery and expert. Because your teacher told you something,
exactly,
and the teacher's gonna go and do whatever. But let's say if you didn't do the research that you're doing, as a child or as a student, as a university student, whatever, wherever you're at, you have to go and seek it yourself.
Exactly,
and you have to have the curiosity
to
want to do that, right?
Exactly.
So then it's just like it's extra labor.
Exactly.
So that's. But thank you for sharing that. Yes, yeah. So I was thinking, like, when you say glass, I was like, wait a minute, hold on.
No, because when we think of that future, like really think about that future, there's not many black bodies in that future of the glass dome, the glass, whatever films we're consuming, like everything that is around you, there's a perception of a future. And I think like it's so wonderful that knowing that okay, in West Africa, in North Africa, in South Africa, in East Africa, people were producing beads for millions of years,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that perception for me, it's like it's almost like placing those bodies in that perception of that future.
And how does that all make you feel? I'm not gonna say. I'll ask. How does that all make you feel when you actually find out where everything that you learn comes? Like much of what you learn comes from. Like when you learn about ancient African traditions. How did that make you feel in the moment at the time?
At the time, I think there's mixed emotions.
Or how does it keep making you feeling? Because I feel like the
you're
more
constantly
you look, the more you realize, dang, okay,
yeah.
right.
There's
yeah,
it's a mixed emotion.
Okay.
I guess like there's sadness, there's anger, there's joy, like this childish curiosity where you're like, what? I found it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then you're constantly like moving forward as a result. Actually, the show that I'll be showing at Norwich this September is called Am I porous or imploding? You know, really thinking about how it makes you feel to go through these archives.
Okay.
What is the approach? Am I porous? Glass is a porous material, right? It's something that allows things to let's say it's a porous material. Like natural glass is a porous material. So how as a human, we're porous. We allow information to go in and information to come out. That's what we should do. Like emotions should go in and should come out.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're reading things like that, it can make you tense. And when you're tense is when you're holding all of that tension, all of that pain, all of that anger.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thinking about these different states. Like I'm also thinking about the volcanoes, because obviously naturally glass is made from a volcano. So when something erupts in nature, that volcano erupts and it's violent, but when it settles down, it creates glass beads. It creates a new life form that grows on top of that black earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really interested in these states. Like, how does it make you feel? What kind of approach do you want to take when you're reading so much difficult information?
Right. Okay.
You
Wow.
know?
Okay.
Am I porous or imploding?
Okay. Yeah, because that's a great way of explaining it, because I felt similar in a way. Like there's this tension, there's built up, there's anger, animosity, but then at the same time there's this sense of joy.
Yes.
And that's the other thing too. How actually okay? Because this is part of my experience. How are you able to communicate that to your peers? Not necessarily. Well, I could say both peers. Let's say peers who are African or Black African who aren't from African background. If that makes sense. But to start, how do your African peers, Black African peers?
Yeah. So, I've been very lucky to meet. I don't meet many people from Togo in London because it's not its colonial country, but I meet a lot of people from Ghana and Nigeria. And Ethiopia and the people that I speak with, like there is this like shared, at least when you're born in that country and you come here, I've had really wonderful conversations because you have this perception of these two realities, you know, and obviously we were children when we came here, so we have this like almost very bright, colorful image of life back in Africa. And I think one of the things that at least those peers we really think about is this idea that like because we have that perception of these two realities, how that some people can see that as like how do you balance those two worlds? You know, do you let one go and do you go forward with the new space? But at least within my peers, we're really thinking about like how we can find ways where we can create a bridge between those two spaces. And then when I speak with my friends who are born in the diaspora, they there is this sort of like excitement, or this wanting to learn more about where they come from. And I think for me, really, this practice is that.
Sorry, it's your phone. Oh, sorry, it's your phone.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay, that's interesting.
For me, this my practice is really also about that. Is like, for me, it's also the same. Like, I have to learn about where I come from, because where I come from, I was speaking French and I learned about French literature. And do you know what I mean? Even if you're on that space, even if you're in that space, there is a colonial perception and education. What you consider as literature is French literature.
Right.
Not African folklore.
That's a good point.
You know, so we're all in the same, at least for me, having these two realities, I really feel that the energy is that people are hungry to know about where they come from, and people want to find ways where they can reimagine themselves. You know, when you're in, at least my experience of being in this country, like, there are perceptions about who you are that you sadly goes in you, you know, and you try to reject it, and you try to find ways where you're like, no, I am this thing, like, I'm this being. But I think more than anything, people, that's a sadness that to a certain extent you want to embrace who you are, and you want to be able to find joy in that, you know, all of you,
Right.
not
Right.
just aspects.
Right, that's a good point. Because sometimes when the work that we do, sometimes depending on the person, sometimes it's received, the information is received, internalized differently, right?
Yes,
Depending
exactly.
on, I think that's very important to understand. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, because some, like, even the work I do it could be similar in a way where if you're learning your history, I know there's a famous quote. I say this all the time, but it's from, I think, Professor Smalls. He talks about not professor, but says, if you learn your history, you erase the mystery.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So again, always goes back to Sankofa and learn from your history, right?
Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah, because that big black hole suddenly becomes smaller, and you reveal what you're looking at. You actually are able to see clearly. And
we talked about this earlier. I know the time, but now we have to talk about this. So you talked about the concept of data thief.
Yeah.
And about there's a few things that I got out of that, but if you want to kind of talk about this whole historical shrinkage.
Yeah.
Right. If you want to kind of elaborate a bit.
Yeah. So, like, through doing this, like, having archival practices as like the foundation of my work, my source of inspiration, I guess, I've become really, really fascinated with this idea of space-time compression. And space-time compression is this theory that our world is getting smaller. And that is done through the fact that we have faster and faster ways of communicating with each other, and therefore have closer proximity to each other. So whether it's like a bullet train or a plane or telephone calls, and as a result, this creates disillusion in people of our world. Like, it makes us feel displaced. And I thought that was really quite interesting as a concept, and thinking about it as someone who similar to that sort of futuristic idea of the data thief, someone who is like collapsing multiple temporalities together, right? You're looking at 5000 BC, you're looking at 1964, you know, and you're then thinking about yourself and how you position yourself within that, and your positioning is the future, essentially, right? So I'm really I started thinking about it in like, okay, so if we have this physical manifestation that our world is shrinking because we're getting closer to each other, and we have more quicker access to each other, that means that our histories are also collapsing together. So that expansiveness that when I was a child I was like, oh, imagine in like 1960, like it feels so far away. A lot of people, when you tell people like, Africa, a lot of African countries only gained independence in the 1950s and 60s. When I was younger, that seemed so far away.
Right.
But now when you think about it, and when you start and when you have like closer and closer proximity to each other, we're having closer and closer proximity to each other's histories.
Yes.
And as a result, you have to have these conversations, you have these conflicts, or these like my narrative is being like distorted because now you're here and you have a whole new have a whole different trajectory.
Exactly.
So I'm really, really interested in this, and I think for me, my practice is trying to essentially deal with that space-time compression on a historical scale. To sort of abandon that chronology, because when you think of Sankofa, it's a way of abandoning this chronology of like past is in the past, present is now, and future is to come. And within African conception of time, like the past is very, very closely aligned to the present. You're really encouraged to constantly refer to your ancestors. I guess within Japanese culture is the same. This idea that even when you have like the Afrandas in Mexico, like there are a lot of communities who do celebrate that connection with with your ancestors or with your past, essentially.
And that's very important because but then again, most of it stems back from the original source. And when we talk about data thief, what could be a different word than thief? I mean, when I heard, it's catchy.
Yeah,
it's catchy, but I'm big on like words.
Yes.
And empowerment. But I mean, data restorer.
Yeah, data. Yeah, that's the thing, because like this film was made in what 90s, and I think when I read it as well, I was like, what do you mean data thief? Because I was like, oh my god, all of the paperwork I have to do to get access to these images. Clearly, obviously you find funny, interesting ways to get around it. Like you sample, you take like 5 seconds, you stretch 5 seconds, you distort. Like I love doing these things, but so because you can't ask for permission for everything, but data thief.
Because I guess you gotta know the term of the date. I mean, what thief means, because I mean, if we think about like colonialism, like
exactly,
thief is is it taking something and not giving it back?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe this is like the data Robin Hood. I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
Like that too.
It's like it's like, because the thing is like, yeah, you're right. Like thief, what does that mean within this context? Because is something that has been taken from you. It's a retrieval.
Oh yeah, okay. Okay, that's a good one. Okay, but yeah, so that's cool. But yeah, today has been a lot of so Sankofa and our is Binka B. So 2 Adikra symbols is amazing how we talk about that today, because Binka B again is you learn the past, and then you learn from the past is Sankofa, and Binka B is no one should bite another. Yeah. Right. So when you understand certain things, just understand how to work collaboratively, how to communicate, and reflect, and how to make transformative changes, right? Because when we learn the history, we realize that we're often repeating things, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's good. Okay, thank you for that.
No worries.
Last question around you flipping this. Where do you see yourself your work, I'd say, leaving a lasting legacy down the line?
Where do I see my work leaving? Okay, I guess that's a question that as someone who's so preoccupied with the past and the future, I haven't really thought about too much. Though I guess the only thing I would say is that I guess that legacy is like allowing for that curiosity to happen, and to like I hope that my work inspires in people to just continuously search. And it's like what you're saying is like, once I receive my PhD, I'm supposed to be a master at this thing, but actually life goes on. And
Man, doesn't
life
stop.
is what makes you I guess a master. Like that idea that you're constantly learning, that like insatiable search for knowledge, I think is something that I would like to I guess, yeah, that I would say that, like, this idea that just be curious and don't always take what you hear for the be it and all.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like, challenge and question and share that knowledge. Don't just hold it and like become your, like,
Yeah.
don't hold that information. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's so many young kids out there who really, really need this information.
Because there are some people who want to be the, if you're gonna be the, what's the data?
Yeah, data.
When you said the
Restore.
what did you say? You said it.
Retrieval.
Retrieval. Yeah. Sometimes people retrieve it, yeah, and they want to keep it to themselves.
Yes.
But that could be people from our background as well, and
Yes.
underrepresented groups too. Because again, it goes back to the structure and how there's limited space
Exactly.
to be in that
Exactly.
to be in that upper echelon, right?
Yeah. But the real activism is really destabilizing this and just give the information, like really just give the information, because that is going to, you don't know who it touches. Like I that's why I use citation in my work, because I realize that like, yeah, at the end of it, this is a document saying you can have access to this information. You can choose not to, but I'm sure there's a few of you who will.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that. So that's okay. That part. Thank you for sharing the work that you're doing. We're gonna get to the last part, the concluding part, and last two questions. All right, and then we can get you out of here. All right. So what, if you could reflect on your journey thus far, what do you know now that you wish you knew back then?
I would say to say no.
To say no.
To say no. And I think I say that because there are spaces, because of the spaces that I've been in, there are moments where you, just by saying no, you protect yourself from specific things. And for me, it was like, and it also gives people an understanding that you're a human being. You know, like, no, I will not have this conversation with you right now. Read this book. Do you know what I mean? It's like, sometimes you, and I'm someone who, it's hard for me to say no. I want to help everybody, and I want to talk with everybody and engage with everybody. But like, at some point, you cannot do this constantly. So you have to find ways to protect yourself and to give yourself space, so that you can also be that human and be that person that loves to help people.
Right. Okay, that's a good point, because some people want you to do their homework for them, right?
Yeah.
Man. Okay. Thank you. Okay, and all right. So, last question. Okay, we'll cap it. What does rehumanization look like to Devine?
What does rehumanization look like to me? I think what I like in that is the re. And so rehumanization, for me, looks like being able to, as we've been talking about the gaze, we've been talking about perception, we've been talking about the fact that all of us are like deeply, deeply visual people. Like our vision is like the most primary, if we have vision, is our primary source of engaging with the outside world. But we know that perception is skewed. We know that. And yet, and as a result, that's something that we all share, you know? And I think for me, rehumanization is being aware of that. Being aware that me and you are standing at a different vantage point, but we're experiencing the same world, you know, as the same
Right.
body, you know, like we share organs, we share heart. And I think that's what rehumanization means. It's like understanding that we're standing around the same circle. We're just looking at it at slightly different vantage points. And to be able to collaborate and to be able to engage with each other, we have to understand those different vantage points so we can work together. I feel like that's what rehumanization means to me.
All right. So just understanding that we all have diverse different experiences, but within those experiences, we are in the same.
Exactly.
It's a prism, maybe.
Exactly.
Okay, the same. Okay, thank you. Okay, nice. I like how you did the art working within that, right? Now, thank you for that, and thank you for today. I appreciate you coming. I told y'all, amazing. And yeah, is there anything you wanted to kind of add that you haven't spoken about yet? I'm sure we kind of went through a bit.
No, I would like to maybe ask you, through
Okay.
doing this process,
Oh, a
what is your
question for me? Okay.
through doing this process, what is your perception of rehumanization? Is it constantly shifting and changing, or is it reaffirming some of your
I think
the thing that drives you, the instinct?
I think it's reaffirming, because it's reaffirming, but then also within that, it's everyone has their own definition, right? And it's about, again, it goes back to this whole series of collaborative practice. So I see rehumanization as, it's like we talked about before, about mastery, being an expert. I saw a good quote, African proverb about you can't be righteous. So you can't be rehumanized, if that makes sense, because life is a continuous process. You're learning. You're going to continue to learn, right? If you decide to do that, right? But that's the whole point of rehumanization, is to understand that it's a process.
Exactly.
And that's the main thing. The process can look different to different types of people, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what I would say, as far as, and then hearing everyone talk about it, it's mainly just the whole conversation that we're having. It's about challenging, because nothing's ever going to be things don't have to be fixed and aren't fixed, really.
Exactly.
So I think that's the whole point
that
of challenge.
Fluidity.
Yes, it's about challenging those narratives and about understanding that life is a process.
Exactly.
And the best way forward is to be able to work collaboratively with other people and be open, curious, and accepting. Because when you're curious, then I tell people this all the time, you start to learn how to ask the right questions, kind of, right? Because I mean, there's not a specific set of questions, but it's more about you start to learn how to ask somebody something. Like, say the term, like we always say, when someone asks you where you from, where you from, well, you can just ask, like, okay, where do you call home? You know what I'm saying? There's different things you can learn how people react to certain things, right? And that's what I mean. But that's part of rehumanizing. It's about trying to understand different things without trying to hurt somebody's feelings, and being able to, be open. Yeah, but that's what I would say, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you for the question. That's the first question I think I've had. But thank you.
No,
I love
this. I love this idea. I love this
Thank you.
project. And I think that was the thing. Like, I remember, I will never forget us meeting, because I was like, what? I've never been presented with this thing, and I feel like it's a tool that is like able to exist within multiple frameworks. You have it as the podcast, which I love, but it can also work within educational environments. In the spaces from which this idea came from.
And I plan on launching a Google Classroom, so I have like a
Nice.
bunch of lectures I have. So I'm trying to do parents can do it with their child, and then also I'm trying to do like a teenage.
Incredible.
So yeah, I'm going to try my best to. It's just about time and getting things done and getting people to kind of to join the journey.
Exactly.
But like, yes, for just the context, the whole point of this was to get people like yourself out there, because I feel like a lot of the work that we do is not as mainstream, if you can say, if that makes sense. The people who are actually doing things, transformative things, should be spotlighted a bit more. That's what I wanted to do. Yeah. So rehumanization, just for everyone, is just the opposite of dehumanization, right? When we think about D, the prefix D is to remove something, right? And since the structure is created, has given us, I don't know, made us perceive the world in certain aspects, right? So we all develop some type of prejudice or stereotypes or bias towards each other, whether that's positive or negative, right? And the whole point is to rehumanize us, to redo again, right? Reclaim our humanity, reclaim authentic ways of living, right?
Exactly.
And part of that is through Sankofa, learning from our history, right? Because a lot of that was already in our traditions and our cultures, right? And it's about understanding that.
Yeah.
And that's what the mainstream does not want us to know. So.
Very true.
Yeah,
very true. Wow. No, I will be following this journey. I already saved it as my favorite podcast on Spotify.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. So I always have notifications when you get a new thing.
And speaking of social media handles, do you have any handles that people can follow you on?
Yes, okay. I have Devine Southgate Smith.
Okay, Devine
so it's Devine Southgate _Smith.
_Smith, okay.
And that's it.
That's IG, Twitter.
That's sorry, that's Instagram.
Oh, not Twitter, X.
Yeah, X.
Instagram.
That's on Instagram. Yeah, Devine Southgate Smith _
Are you on LinkedIn at all or none of them?
On LinkedIn, yes, but I don't. I'm sure if you just type in Devine Southgate Smith, you'll find it.
Whatever, just Devine Southgate Smith. Living out here in Hackney, Shoreditch area.
Yes.
That's where we're at right now.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why you're amazing, because I needed somewhere to be, so they let me crash on the couch.
Yes.
So we just ended up doing this today. I'm happy that we did. Okay, but
yeah,
thank you for coming.
Me too.
Thank you for everything. You're amazing. Keep loving yourself and loving others.
Yes, you too. Yeah. And I wish you all the most amazing luck with your new ventures, your new exciting stuff, and with this as well.
Yeah, you too, because I'll have you back. I'll definitely have you back on here. We'll talk again. So. All right.
Amazing.